The nation remembering First Lady Barbara Bush this morning. Several past presidents, along with First Lady Melania Trump, planning to attend Barbara Bush's funeral tomorrow in Houston. Our next guest spent a lot of time with Mrs. Bush and her husband, President George H.W. Bush, serving as his speechwriter. Joining me right now is Mary Kate Cary. She is former speechwriter for President George H.W. Bush and University of Virginia Miller Center Senior Fellow. Mary Kate, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So you made a documentary on President Bush called it 41 on 41, which stars Mrs. Bush. Let's take a look.
When we were first married, I had no idea what my life was going to be. It might have scared me if I'd known, but nobody in the world has ever had the life I've had. I've had none of the responsibilities and all the joys of being the wife of George Bush.
Tell us about working with her on this documentary, Mary Kate.
She was just spectacular. And that particular quote, Maria, that she just said on all of the joys and none of the responsibilities, you know, I would have to respectfully disagree with her on that one. She had all of the responsibilities. You know, they had 6 children, lost one of them at age 3, Robin, to leukemia. And then they lived in 29 homes in 17 cities with 5 kids, and she bore the brunt of that responsibility so that he was able to have the career that he had that allowed him to become President of the United States and was probably the most qualified guy in American history outside of the founders to take that job. And a lot of it had to do with her hard work behind the scenes. So she really did a tremendous amount of public service in her own way behind the scenes and was very, very quiet about it. So I give her great respect for that.
That model of faithfulness is so interesting, Mary Kate. When you look at the 29, you said 29 houses, 17 cities. I mean, you just got to stop for a second and think about that. But how did she process that behind-the-scenes role? I mean, you know, for that many years to be behind the scenes, serving, not getting a lot of credit, probably getting more blame sometimes than credit. How does somebody work in that kind of role and do it with such joy, the joy that she manifests in this documentary and these interviews?
She was a person of tremendous faith, and I think that's how she did it. She took in all kinds of people who, you know, she would open her family up to them. They had a young man named Don Rhodes who was a campaign volunteer in his 20s, who was an orphan and was sort of half deaf. And they took him in as their own in the 1960s and kept them on their personal payroll until he died in his 70s. And that, to me, was a great metaphor for them opening their family to all kinds of people. He made a plaque for the Bushes that Mr. Bush kept on his desk for years that said, "Preach the gospel at all times, use words when necessary." And that is Barbara Bush. She never talks about it. She just quietly, behind the scenes, opens up her family, you know, starts the Literacy Foundation, raises money for cancer research, because she didn't want other families to go through what she did, losing a child or having a child struggling to read, and that was what motivated her.
Mary Kate, it's something that, it's Dagan McDowell, something that Brian said about credit. And this is a question, but it's because Barbara Bush, that wasn't what drove her. It wasn't getting credit for raising her family or being a strong wife or promoting literacy or taking care of her an ill child or bringing people into her home. That's not what mattered. What mattered was being that strong mother, being that strong wife, and being a caregiver even to strangers. It's not about that. In today's society, we think about, I need credit. She deserves credit. We need to champion this person on Instagram and on Twitter. That's what separates someone like Barbara Bush from, quite frankly, the rest of us.
That is exactly right. And I think that's over the years going to be, it'll come out, all of the things that they've done. I saw one figure that they had raised a total of $1 billion for various charities over the years. When you think about President Bush and the tsunami relief and, you know, all the things they do, Points of Light, the Literacy Foundation. But you would never in a million years hear that from the Bushes. The people I heard it from were not in the Bush family, and they would never keep track of that. It's almost like it doesn't count if you brag about it, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. You know,
yeah, that's fine. Mary Kate, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mary Kate.
Thanks for having me,
and thank you for being here.